Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the second session today of the Yazoo Backwater public meetings. My name is Mike Reneker. I am a project manager with the Vicksburg District, and again, wanted to welcome you here. Before we get started, I do have some introductions. So let's go down the list here. We have from EPA Region 4, we have Ms. Katie Butler, the Water Division's Director. We also have Intale Kinjumba, a NEPA lead with Region 4. From EPA headquarters, we have Ms. Stacy Jensen, Director of Oceans, Wetlands, and Communities, and Ms. Laura Shumway, a Special Assistant at headquarters. From Fish and Wildlife, we have Mr. James Austin, Mississippi Ecological Services Field Supervisor, and Daphne Pitchford, Acting Deputy Regional Director. Let's see, from the Assistant Secretary of the Army, this is Mrs. Robin Calissimo. She is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Army, Project Planning and Policy Review, and Colonel Jeremiah Gibson, from the Commander from the Vicksburg District. And we also have some local officials. We have Mr. Martin Pace from the Warren County Sheriff's Office, and we have Anna Timms from Senator Hyde Smith's office. Is there anybody else that I left off the list? Any elected officials? Okay. Before we get started, I'd like to turn it over to Commander Gibson for his opening remarks.
Thanks, Mike, and for all those who helped support putting on this event for us. That's hard work to coordinate one of these, so I recognize all those behind the scenes. It's important to highlight really the collaborative and constructive nature between the family of federal agencies that are here today. Each bring their unique ideas to this process, so thank you to all those who have traveled in and continue to work this back in your home stations. It's also important to recognize that this is a new project, and so we look forward to sharing those ideas with you, really to match the needs of the area. And lastly, thank you for participating in this public event. We're here to listen and to learn from you through this process. Thanks.
All right, let's go over the rules of participation for today. Keep in mind, number one, that we are recording this both through audio, but also the video as well. These will be available on the website as soon as we can get them loaded up. Today we are taking your comments, recording them, but you can also send us emails. The email address is up there. You can also send your comments in through traditional mail. And in the back of the room, we have comment cards, so please feel free to fill those out as well. Again, we'll be capturing your comments today, so there will be a time limit on your comments. It'll be 3 minutes. We have an alarm that's set up for you. But don't worry, if you want to go longer than that, the only thing I ask is just get back in line so that everybody has enough time to speak, and we want to ensure that we capture everybody's comments. In the back of the room, we have our poster board set up, and we will have subject matter experts there, so feel free to ask them technical questions or something that isn't covered in the presentation today. Finally, let's be respectful and courteous in your interactions with others to give everybody the best opportunity to speak and to comment. So why are we here today? Well, it is a priority for the Corps of Engineers and our interagency partners to provide effective flood risk and environmentally sustainable solutions to the Yazoo Backwater area. Today, you will be given a background on the proposed action. We will present the draft environmental impact statement, and when that's over, we will receive your comments. So the public meeting schedule that we've been on started last week with the virtual meeting. Yesterday we were in Rolling Fork and we did 3 sessions. We did one this morning here. This is obviously the 2 o'clock with one more later tonight. And as you know, the draft EIS is published for public review and comment. This is a 45-day comment period, which ends on August the 12th. Your comments, of course, are welcomed and encouraged. Once the comment period closes, the team will be working to include these comments into the final EIS. And now we'll hear some words from the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works, Mr. Mike Connor.
Hi, I'm Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works, Mike Connor. My office provides policy direction and oversight of the Corps Civil Works program. Thanks to all of you here today to provide us feedback on the draft environmental impact statement and proposed water management plan for the Yazoo Backwater area. Your comments are crucial as we work to craft a responsive solution for systemic flooding in the Yazoo Basin. Input we received from previous sessions, including those I attended in May of last year, have helped to inform the proposed solution in draft EIS. Through this effort, we are delivering on a commitment by the Biden-Harris administration to manage water in the Yazoo Backwater area to reduce backwater flood risk to residents and agriculture while minimizing environmental impacts. Consistent with the goal, all mitigation necessary to fully offset unavoidable impacts to wetlands, as well as fish, wildlife, and habitats, will be secured prior to initiation of project construction. The Corps has developed this proposed water management plan with meaningful coordination with the Environmental Protection Agency and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, while encouraging open dialogue and transparency with the public to ensure all interested parties are heard. This partnership has helped us deliver a collaborative water management solution that is responsive to the many diverse interests of the region. This solution will reduce flood impacts to communities in Yazoo, including underserved and overburdened communities, and will support agricultural production, which provides for the vital economic needs of the Yazoo area. All of this while minimizing environmental and ecological impacts, including those to fish and wildlife in the basin. Again, I appreciate your participation in today's session and your input to help us refine the proposed water management solution in the Yazoo Backwater area. Thank you. Hi, I'm Assistant.
And now I'll turn it over to Ms. Robin Colosimo.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Robin Colosimo. I'm the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works, as was previously described, and that was Mike Connor, my boss, who was speaking. We work in a small oversight office of the Corps of Engineers. It's roughly 25 people that oversee a 40,000-person agency. And our job is to resolve many challenges, including projects that are complex and long stalled. And this project has risen to that level beginning in the administration. So my boss is a Biden-Harris official. He's one of 6 assistant secretaries of the Army. Where we are today in this effort is approaching an important juncture in our progressive interagency work. We are seeking to resolve complex challenges for and with communities that are long overdue. And I want to thank you for your time, your input, and your engagement today. Next slide, please. In terms of the backwater flooding, you all know this better than I. But the impetus for this effort really was that 2019 and 2020 event that repeated it on some level. The 6 months of standing water, the impacts to people, to habitat, to wildlife, to the environment. I've heard lots of that over the last few days. But that was the impetus, and that's why we've taken this interagency approach to move forward, to think about how we resolve these problems. Next slide, please. I said this over the last few days, and I mean it every time I say it, is this interagency collaboration is the most progressive work in my career. And I've been doing this a really long time. It started with the 22 listening sessions where 6 policy officials came from DC to listen in Rolling Fork about what was being experienced in 2019 and what the challenges were and the diverse issues at hand. The intent beginning then remains today is to craft a whole of government approach, crafting a solution within implementing authorities among the implementing agencies. That's a challenge every day of the week. It's particularly nuanced here. So what we've been doing is sitting side by side in DC and region and the district level offices where the boots are on the ground with you all to understand the problems, think about how we think about the problems, share data, leverage expertise, share modeling, understand the equities that we represent in our various responsibilities, how they overlay or intersect, and craft those solutions. This is hard and intricate work, but we've been doing that with an end in mind. In my view, this is the way it should always be done, and it's certainly setting the standard for a new standard for interagency collaboration. It started with those 22 sessions and was guided throughout 23 and continues to date. Next slide, please. Part of that process were listening sessions. I'm sure all of you participated in these 14 sessions to date, but we wanted to hear more and understand more about the basis of the concerns. Obviously, you've lived in this, and so your observations are really important to inform all the work we've been doing. And the issues raised were crossing the gamut as outlined on this slide. Overarchingly, what we heard, recurring floods are a huge, big worry. No one wants to repeat 6 months of standing water, and a frustration of lack of collaboration among the agencies. And the key issues are diverse issues, and trade-offs exist. Next slide, please. The persistent challenges kind of fall into 5 buckets. Mitigation needs, timing and strategy, impacts to overburdened and underserved communities downstream, impacts the functions and values of floodplain wetlands, impacts to endangered species in wetlands, and perceptions that the pumps will only serve agricultural production. We formulated a solution with these in mind. Next slide, please. So this is kind of the way we've structured the thinking around the project purpose we have before you. This is a new approach, and it's a new approach because of the interagency collaboration. And so what we're talking about today is about flood risk reduction for communities, including overburdened and underserved, and the local economy through targeted water operations. A really important concept, targeting those operations. We're targeting residences and the roads that isolate them, schools, infrastructure, commercial properties, and prime farmland while avoiding and minimizing and fully mitigating for environmental losses. Most importantly, we're not optimizing one thing over another. We're trying to account through the timing of what the needs are of the system. And that's what we'll learn more about today. Overarchingly, we want to hear more about what you think about these approaches, and that will help us move through this process, and I thank you for being here.
Thank you, Robin. Now we'll discuss a little bit about the draft EIS. First up, I'll turn it over to Mr. Corey Winders, Branch Chief for H&H.
Good afternoon. So I'm going to talk a little bit first about the Yazoo Backwater area, give kind of a 30,000-foot view of the area we're talking about, the protection it has, and some of the problems that it has. So kind of you can focus on the image kind of on the left side of the screen. And we're talking the southern half of the Yazoo Basin, northwest part, the state of Mississippi. It has some level protection with the Mississippi River levee on the west, which provides flood protection from the Mississippi River. Then you have a series of levees with the Yazoo Backwater levee, Will Whittington levee, and other levees around the south and the east side that provide protection from a higher Yazoo River. The bathtub that's imaged there is truly what occurs in this area. You have rainfall that falls in the basin and it goes down Still Bayou and the Little Sunflower River, which are highlighted by the buckets at the top. And when we have high water, it does form that bathtub effect. So at the very bottom of the screen, you see the 2 gates. It's the Still Bayou and the Little Sunflower structures. So we're allowed to open those when the Yazoo River is lower than the interior. We can open those gravity feed water out of the backwater area. But when the Yazoo River and Mississippi River are higher than the backwater, we have to close those gates. And any rainfall that occurs during that time that the gates are closed does accumulate at the bottom of the basin and contributes to any backwater flooding that does occur. So it's just a kind of a high-level view of the area we're looking at and the problems that occur. And I'll talk more about the details of the proposed solution here in a few slides. Right now, I'm going to turn it over to Brandon Davis.
Thank you, Corey. Well, good afternoon, and echoing what Mike has said earlier, appreciate you all being here today. Sheriff Pace, thank you for you and your deputies being with us, and just grateful to have the support here and to hear your voice. I'm Brandon Davis. I am the planning lead at the Vicksburg District. And before I get started in my slides, I want to set the table on a couple of things for you. One, our charge by Secretary Connor's office was provide analysis on a potential list of alternatives so he and his office may make an informed decision. So what we're going to show you today is not a decision. It's going to be a list and array of alternatives that we have put together with information that we have. That leads to my next point. As the Corps of Engineers, we are a risk-informed decision-making organization. So what does that mean? It means we're going to take the available information that we have, do analysis on it, and assign risk to it. And we understand that we may have to go back and make adjustments to things, but that's the great thing about our 6-step planning process is that we can go back and add additional analysis if more information becomes available to us. But I will say on the information that we have right now that's going to be sent to the Secretary's office, we're vertically aligned with our team on the current analysis that we have. And finally, before I get started, I want to just say I'm not going to sit up here and pretend I'm an expert and I know all the answers to your questions, but we do have subject matter experts that'll be at the back of the room that with our hydraulic analysis our environmental and cultural resources that will be able to answer any of your questions. Certainly invite you after you provide comments to please stick around, look at our boards, and let's discuss if you have any specific questions. So go ahead getting started on this. The first slide is the planning objectives, and pretty self-explanatory. First objective is reduce damages associated with backwater flooding. We'll look at that at the urban level, rural, and then agricultural level. Urban, we all know what that is, homes, and of course there's a lot of structures out in the rural area that's involved, but the agriculture as well. So we want to look at that and the crop and non-crop associated with that. Second one is reduce the risk associated with agriculture and associated costs with intensification after flooding. So there's a lot of cost that go to our farmers and those that are involved with land leveling and herbicides, fungicides, various things that you have to prepare for after you see a flood event. And also the non-crop factors that most don't think about with the damages to barns, fence rows, and then sometimes even equipment. So we want to reduce the risk to agriculture. Reduce adverse environmental impacts. Being from here, I understand what the impacts were, especially if you look at the deer population from 2019. There was a lot of deer that had no place to go. They had nothing to eat and they starved to death. And we experienced that for years, the impacts. And not only deer, there were other wildlife species as well. So reducing adverse impacts to our environment and also our wetlands and tied into that. And something very big is compensatory mitigation, securing that prior to project impacts, whether that be through land purchases or credits. So next slide. So measures and alternatives evaluated. So what is an alternative, what is a measure? So a measure is a feature or activity that can be implemented at a specific site to address one or more of our planning objectives. So the objectives I just talked about, it's coming up with ways that we can address that. And those can be either a structural or a non-structural measure. But really thinking about a measure, it's really a building block, okay? You can stack it on top of each other to build what you're going to try to do to solve your issue. So some that you can see on the slide here, I'm not going to go through all of them, but you see a pump station location, pump station operation elevations. You look down to the capacity of the pumps that we looked at, low flow wells. And then non-structural measures that can range from elevation of structures, relocation of structures, acquisition of structures, or dry proofing, or some type of flood proofing to that nature. Next slide. So here we get into our array of alternatives, and I wanted to remind you that these are the alternatives that are in the draft EIS that will be presented to Secretary Connor in his office. The first one is a no action, and we are required by our regulation ER 1105-2-103 to analyze that alternative. But we also look at the two operational scenarios, one alternative 2 and then alternative 3. We're going to dive deeper into these in a second, but I'll give you a little overview. And really the difference between alternative 2 and alternative 3 is the growing season of the crop. You see alternative 2, the crop season 16 March through 15 October, and a non-crop season of 16 October through 15 March. That's tied to elevations of when the pump could be on. If there are floodwaters, we'll get into that a little deeper. But one thing that I really hope that I hear comments from you guys on this is that my background is agricultural economics. I understand you guys as farmers, if you grow cotton, cotton usually goes past 15 October, maybe up into November when you're harvesting after you defoliate it and go through those spells. So we did hear some testimony that the people weren't as concerned about floodwaters in October because it's extremely rare to see floods in the fall like that, but it's just something to consider, and we welcome your comments on that. Alternative 3, looking at the crop season, bumping it back a few days to 25 March through October 15th. And then the non-crop season through 16 October through 24 March, just bumping it back a few days. 34 low-flow wells, and these are for both alternatives. 34 low-flow groundwater wells and our upper basin to supplement flows. These wells are about 5 CFS apiece. We just want to make sure that we have enough flows during drought conditions not to impact our aquatic species. And then we have some non-structural measures at the 90 and the 93 elevation. And then finally, alternative 4 is the non-structural only plan, some acquisition of structures in recent floodplain from 2019, and then also potential acquisition of cleared land from 2019 floodplain. Next slide. So this slide here really breaks down these alternatives that we were talking about. And again, the big difference between 2 and 3 are the crop, what we're calling the crop seasons, and when we're going to maintain the pump elevation. So we talked about the seasons during the crop and the non-crop seasons for alternative 2, but it also includes a 25,000 CFS pump located at the Still Bayou area. The non-crop season, trying to maintain an elevation up to 93, and then during the crop growing season, maintaining an elevation with a pump to 90. Full utilization of the water control manual for Still Bayou to promote fishery species diversification. Want to make sure that we are not impacting fisheries ecosystems. And then we talked about the 34 low-flow shallow wells in the north part of the reach to help with supporting aquatic species. Now, the non-structural piece, we were looking at mandatory buyouts for up to right at 100 structures at or below the 90 elevation of areas that frequently flood. Voluntary acquisitions of around 230 structures located at the 93 level of inundation, and then acquisition of around 11,800 acres of cleared land at or below the 2-year floodplain. Or we could offer restricted easements based on voluntary participation of that. And then 27,000 acres between the 2 and 5-year floodplain. I want to point out that these are just suggestions. There's no type of plan laid out where we're going on a map, we can go point and say we're going to try to acquire this property or that property. These are areas where we're just looking at that are frequently flooded that we may be able to do some type of real estate transaction. So alternative 3, again, not much of a difference between the non-structural 25,000 CFS pump located at the same site. Utilization of water control manual. Again, the difference is bumping the crop season back about 10 days to the 25th of March. That's really the big difference. Next slide. So we look at the alternative 4, the non-structural plan, and really it's no changes to the existing operational plan for Still Bayou. And during low water, continue current operation to maintain the elevations of around 68.5 to 70 feet. Non-structural, approximately 1,800 structures within the 2019 floodplain could be considered for voluntary acquisition, and then the potential voluntary acquisition of around 138,000 acres of cleared land or some type of restricted easement based on a voluntary basement. Again, I just want to point out that that's still something that would have to be put into plan. So if anyone out there is panicking, is my land going to be taken? Those aren't the type of conversations that we can have today. These are just suggestions of what we could do on a voluntary basis. So I'm going to turn it back over to Corey to talk some more of the H&H information.
All right, thanks, Brandon. So you just heard about the 2 alternatives. You heard about crop season, non-crop season, those dates. Maintaining to a 90 during crop season and a 93 to non-crop season. So, what does that look like? How does that work? So, talk about the image on the right-hand side of the screen first. So the light blue area is a 90-foot elevation. And the light pink color is a 93-foot elevation. That peach or kind of a light orange color is what occurred in 2019. So that kind of puts a little bit of perspective what the 90, 93, and 2019 look like. So how are we going to operate the pumps? How will this whole thing work? So what we're going to do is we will look at three things during a flow. We'll look at how much flow we have at Still Bayou. Then we will look at how much flow we have at Grayson and Anguilla. So Grayson and Anguilla are the two northernmost gauges in the Backwater area on the Still Bayou and the Little Sunflower River. So if we see enough flow at those two gauges plus Still Bayou to where our pump curve says it's going to be approaching 93 or reach 93, we'll talk non-crop season 93 for this example. So if we see that it's going to approach 93, we will turn the pumps on early to maintain 93. So for most flood events that you can think of, 1997, 2009, pumps would have cut on around 92. For the larger flood events, 2019, 2020, the pumps would have cut on a little bit before 92, 91.6, 91.7, somewhere in there. So what that'll do is that'll maintain at a 93 foot where we wouldn't exceed that in most events. So what does that look like? So in 2019, with the pumps, you would have seen a peak elevation at 93.6. So it's about 4.5 feet lower than what was actually seen in 2019 or what actually occurred. The 2020 event, we would have been able to hold to the 93. So that's about 3.5 to 4 feet, almost 4 feet lower than what occurred in 2020. So we would follow that same process during the crop season where we would turn the pumps on a little bit early to manage to the 90-foot elevation. Next slide. Okay, so another question that we've gotten is, how often will the pumps cut on? Will they cut on multiple times a year? Are they on all the time? How many days are they on? So this slide, on the right-hand side of the slide, you see the years that the pump would have operated from 1979 to 2020. So 1979 was the first year that the Yazoo Backwater was completely built. So the pump would have cut on 20 years out of the 43-year period of record. So less than 50% of the time, the pump would have operated. Only 2 of those years, 1991 and 2015, would it have cut on more than once. It would have cut on twice those 2 years. Outside that, the pumps would only cut on one time. So you see the days there, the number of days of how long the pump would have operated each of those events in the kind of the middle of the screen or kind of side of the screen there, the median days. That is the average number of days that the pump would have operated. So roughly a month is the average time the pump would have been on. So you can see 2019, 2020, really large floods. The pump would have operated for a large number of days. If you exclude those as outliers, then the pumps would have operated, the average would have been about 20 days a year that it would have pumped. So this analysis was also done with strictly these 20 years that the pump would have been on. If you add in all the zeros for all the 23 years during this period of record that the pump would not have cut on, your average day pumping for the entire period of record is about 15 days a year. And I think it's also important to note that from 2021 to present, the pumps would not have cut on. So just a quick update on kind of how the pumps would operate, how long they would cut on, when they would cut on, and I'll be in the back at the end by the H&H boards, and we can answer any more questions that you have. But I will turn it back over to Brandon.
Thank you, Corey. So we talked a little bit about mitigation earlier, and we had mentioned that the mitigation will be secured prior to project impacts. And how would we do that? There are a couple of ways. One, we could do in-kind purchases through a fee program. There's an opportunity to purchase mitigation bank credits throughout the Yazoo Valley study area, and then also construction of any Yazoo-specific mitigation by the Corps for the remaining items. So there's several ways that we could look to mitigate for this, but I think the key thing to take away is that any required acres or credits will be secured prior to the project impacts. Next slide. So I can't say enough, and Robin mentioned it, I can't say enough great how the collaboration's been between our sister agencies with the EPA, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Corps on the environmental compliance part. Currently, biological assessment is being finalized for the pondberry and is being sent to the service to initiate formal consultation. So that is going well. Also for the section 106, that's cultural resources. We have cultural resources all around us that we don't even know about. And we are working to develop a programmatic agreement. It will be finalized once we know an alternative is selected. So a programmatic agreement is really what is your plan of action, okay? If we put the pump in or we do a non-structural measure, whatever that might be, how is that going to impact potential historical sites that we might impact? So you have to develop a plan, and that's what we do. We're working with the State Historic Preservation Office, also tribal nations to develop that. Had an initial kickoff meeting with the tribes and the SHPO on 3 July, SHPO being the State Historic Preservation Office, and then a virtual meeting is set for early August 2024. Team's doing a great job of working with their partners in that. And then finally, our Section 404B1, great collaboration between the EPA and the Corps of Engineers on that. The draft 404B1 is out for public review in the draft DEIS, and coordination will continue with the state of Mississippi for ongoing water quality certification for the project. So that's the information that I have for you guys. Again, glad you're here. Like I said, if you have specific technical questions, we will have subject matter experts in the back to work with you and talk with you, and I'll be back there as well. But again, thank you for being here. Mike?
Thanks, Brandon. So let's talk about the timeline for this effort right here. As I mentioned before, August the 12th ends the public review period. Between August and October, the team will be working on the public comments and to finalize the EIS. So between October and December of this year, we're looking for a final EIS, the notice of availability, the final secretary determination, and ultimately the record of decision. And with that, it concludes our presentation. So now we are opening up the floor for comments. Reminder, we're doing a 3-minute timer. And please speak into the microphone to make sure that we get your name and your full comments. So the floor is open.
So noted. I thank y'all for being here today and for opening up for our comments. I'm encouraged by the level of working together that I see. And I thank you and the Corps specifically for all the multiple works done through this. I'm Dr. Peggy Calloway, and I'm third-generation property owner at Eagle Lake. I have been there as a full-time resident for 27 years. We were kind of in a unique situation. We are the first house on the outside of the Brunswick levee. So we're higher than some. And during 2011, I was evacuated. I was single at the time, still working for the Corps. And the damages that I had that year were like $89,000, of which flood insurance paid $1,000 for the move only. And then in 2019, we stayed in the house. We pumped every 2 hours for 3 weeks. Had 3 different pumps going. We had a bigger one that was diesel and a smaller one that was gas, and then a little one in the house to pump the water out of the laundry room. We had water all under the house and had subsequent damage to the floor, and the foundation shifted. Flood insurance won't pay for that, so damages of $118,000 and flood insurance paid $12,000. Our repairs were further delayed, which caused more damage to the bank and pier because the contractors couldn't get there in 2020. It's hard enough to get contractors up to Eagle Lake, but then in 2020 the roads were closed again. And I think you might understand, or it might be hard to understand, when you don't have trash pickup, you're not getting mail, no packages, no Amazon packages. that's what saves us when we can't get out to town. But we didn't have that, no ambulance service. Think about that. We lost many friends and neighbors who just couldn't deal with one more flood. And it took us an hour and a half to get to Vicksburg for groceries or anything instead of a half hour. All of the businesses up there closed down, so we really didn't have anything except what we could get to in Rolling Fork or Vicksburg. And those are numbers. You have to think of the impact. Am I up? Go ahead. All the dead and dying animals, every time you left to go to town, it was so terribly heartrending and depressing because the deer just kept getting worse and worse. And yes, there were small animals, but there were so many thousands of deer, including one that decided it would crawl up in our yard and die. So a couple of years later, when I'm digging out through the vines that came up after the trees and the shrubs and everything, I come face to face with a skeleton, deer skeleton, and it brought it all back home. So again, I thank y'all. I'm encouraged that the agencies are all working together because that can be a challenge. I know. I've seen some of that. And we support Alternative 2 without mandatory buyout. Thank you.
My name's Victoria Darden. I live in Olmert. I've gotten up here for the last 5 years and told y'all my story and the people in my community stories. And I said I wasn't gonna cry, but here I am again. We appreciate all the work you've put into this, but I would like to say that Alternative 1 is not an option. Alternative 4 is not an option. Alternative 2 is the best of the 4 that you have given us, but those are not the best dates for us. We need a better planting date, cropping season, and elevations at the pump cut zone. It is not fair for us to have to be underwater for over 6 months. The amount that it took on our mental health in the area is unbelievable. I don't know if y'all are aware, but in Rolling Fork last year, we had an EF4 tornado that came through. Okay, that's a natural disaster. You cannot prepare for that. That just happens. This flood was a man-made disaster that deserves a man-made solution, and y'all can do that. This project was started in 1941 with the Flood Control Act. It stated it needed a pumping station. We are 83 years later, and we're still talking about it. I know y'all have worked very hard on this, but y'all can do better. You've got to. Our people in our community cannot keep going through this. The animals, you will not find more passionate, resilient people that care about the environment, the community, and the animals and the people that live in this area. They want the best. They want this to be here for future generations, because the truth of the matter is, it's not about us that live here now. It's about the future generation that is yet to come. They should not have to boat in and out of their houses just to survive or try and provide a living for their family. This should not be a struggle every time. It's ridiculous. Y'all know the problem is there. Let's fix this and do the best we can. We've got to, because it's not about us here. It's about the future. Thank you.
Hey there. My name's Stormy Deere. I'm a licensed state wildlife rehabber. I live in Redwood, Mississippi, which is Warren County, right on the Issaquah-Warren County line. I don't have any scientific data that like y'all would have, your scientists would have, but I will tell you that my husband and I's observations since the 2019 flood, the animal population is not back yet. The small animal, the mammals, we're just not seeing the numbers that we used to see. That being said, what Victoria just said, she is correct. You're not going to find a group of people that's more concerned about the environment or the animals, okay? But let's talk about 1941, 83 years. 83 years we've been here. And I'm pretty sure that pondberry bush drowned in 6 months worth of flood water. Pretty sure it did. We have 22 flood control levees in our geographical area. We are the only one, we make 23. We're the only one without a pumping station. Why is that? The last time that I spoke, and what this is, because this is a dog and pony show, we flooded in 2019, 5 years, and we're still up here begging for people to do something, begging for environmental justice. The truth of the matter is, if the Mississippi South Delta had the voting population pool and had the financial wherewithal, we would have had this problem would have been solved years and years ago. We're not stupid. We may talk slow, but we're not stupid. I said the last time that I came up to speak, 83 years, somebody's going to write the history of this. It will be written, and I'm just wondering who's going to go down as just another performer, or who's going to go down as somebody who actually stood up for the people of South Delta in this circus, because this is a circus. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Martin Pace. I'm the sheriff of Warren County. I've been with the Warren County Sheriff's Office since 1981, and I've worked and experienced every flood since '81. I've been the sheriff since 1996. I've seen the devastation. The last time that we met, when we were at the Vicksburg District, I quoted a lot of statistics. I had the hardcore stats of how many thousands and thousands of dollars of overtime, how it impacted the communities from a public safety standpoint. What I want to talk to you today about briefly is just the human impact and the wildlife impact. I'm the grandson of a game warden. Love wildlife, don't hunt, love wildlife. To ride that levee and see hundreds of deer and every other type of wildlife you can think of dead and dying on the side because of the floodwater is devastating. To see baby deer, one of which still had the umbilical cord attached, with a drowned mother in the backwater. There was literally no place to go. It looked like Noah's Ark. Everything that didn't swim was on that levee because it was the only place they could go. And this is not for days. It was for weeks on weeks on weeks on weeks. The ones that weren't drowning were starving to death. From a human impact, this impacts more than just those in the flood area. If you look at the farming community, it not only adversely impacts the farmers, but it's everything downrange, all the domino effect. If you close a plant that manufactures automobiles in Dearborn, Michigan, I promise it affects more than the people that own Ford Motor Company. It affects everybody downrange. So does the agriculture impact. It affects the farmers, it affects the truck drivers, it affects the contractors, it affects the people in the warehouses. It's all of the distribution chain down the line. It's affecting their income. It's affecting their ability to provide income for their family. So it's not just that one farmer that's being affected. I've looked at the proposals. I'm not a hydrologist. I don't know all the technical part. I think the option 2 makes the most sense to me as far as the mechanisms. I would have to defer to the farmers on the specific dates. But I just want you to really think about, this is not just flooding buildings. This is affecting people's lives, and it's affecting the wildlife in this area that are such a great part of us living in the state of Mississippi, is enjoying the wildlife and enjoying the opportunity to be amongst the wildlife. So think about the people, think about the wildlife. Thank you. God bless you.
My name is Bill Rutherford. I'm from Rolling Fork, Mississippi, and I'm in agriculture. And I want to thank the Corps of Engineers for all their hard work over the years and years and years. I got married in 1973 in February, and I just started farming, and we had a major flood. And I didn't know anything about, any of the projects, any things that were happening with the floodwaters. But I remember the older generation telling us that we're fixing to get it fixed, that we're fixing to have a levee system and a pumping system, and this wasn't going to happen anymore. Well, it's happened over and over and over. The land that I live on, just south of Rolling Fork, was land grant to a man in 1833. He came from Virginia and went to Vicksburg, and he met with some Indian scouts, and he told them he wanted some land, in the Mississippi Delta. And they said, we know where there's land with no watermarks on the trees. And they came to where I farm today. Today, there's watermarks on the trees, 3 and 4 feet deep, high on the trees. Watermarks don't come from flash floods. Watermarks come from floods that stay there for months and months. It just seems so silly to me that this has taken this long. I'm 72 years old, and this started 10 years before I was born, and we don't have the pumps yet. And obviously, alternative two, if you're in agriculture, that's the only option that we have. I wish it was even better than that one. For environmental groups to hold this back just seems so asinine. Obviously, they're not ever here when the flood's here. If they were, they'd be pushing as hard as we are to get the pumps, because it devastates, it ruins everything. Our oak trees rot, our livestock die, fences for cows and stuff are ruined and rotting, and it's just devastating. I farm. About half of what I farm I own, and the other half I rent. Well, when you have these floods, most of the people I rent from are widow women that need their money. So we pay our rents up front, we pay our land payments, we pay our equipment payments, and then we don't have a damn crop. I mean, it's just absolutely asinine. And this is not the lowest of low land. This land is not supposed to be flooding. It's flooding because of the projects never got finished. But anyway, thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Robbie Braxton. I run B&B Farms there in Valley Park in Fiddler, Mississippi. I have a very unique situation. I have my uncle on one side of the family is Tommy Hingst. He was the one who actually did the proposal and went before Congress in 86, I believe it was, for the pump system. I have another uncle on my other side of the family. His name is Clifton Porter. And he was in the very first meeting. As a matter of fact, it was the only meeting that the environmentalists came to back in the early 80s with the local folks. And after that meeting was over, my uncle stopped the guy before he walked out of the meeting. He said, if you don't mind me asking, what's your plan? He said, I don't mind telling you the plan at all. He said, we want a fence from the Mississippi River to Yazoo River just south of Rolling Fork. And everything from that fence to the Yazoo pumping station to that location to be, quote, pristine, untouched wilderness. My uncle laughed at him. So, well, how do you think you're going to get that happen? He says, it's very simple. All we have to do is keep these pumps from going in. And we'll either starve you out or flood you out. Well, it took them 50 years, and they just about got us.
Hi, Jackie Kerr. I want to say thanks again for everybody that's looking into this issue. Please count me as one who supports the Yazoo backwater pump option 2. I worked as a waterfowl biologist and a forest manager in the South Delta for nearly 20 years. I want to speak for the bottomland hardwood forests and wetlands. They need a pump, and option 2 will serve them the best. It's not great, but it's better than the other options. As a biologist, it didn't take me but about 3 months on Delta National Forest to become painfully aware of the issues with the backwater flooding when I started working in 1990. It's really hard to manage for wildlife when it's flooded during the growing season. Even though this area was always influenced by water, first as a delta and then as a floodplain, this flooding is different. The soil, flora, and fauna evolved with winter flooding, not high waters during the growing season. This man-made flooding during the summer is causing species shift in the forest and diversity reduction. The lack of plant growth and seed production annually is detrimental for the bottomland hardwood ecosystems, especially wintering waterfowl. I participated in a butterfly count on the forest last week. It was easy to see the forest degradation due to this flooding. Someone new to the area could say, "What a beautiful forest." And I would say, you should have seen it in 1990. But when I was there in 1990, the old timers said, you should have seen it in the 40s and 50s. The effects of the 2019 and 20 flood back to back was obvious when I was on my butterfly count. There were so many dead, standing, and fallen trees. This is not the way a mature bottomland hardwood forest needs to look or should look. This is not a healthy ecosystem out there because of this flooding. Scientists have documented the decline. Look at the pondberry. The numbers from 1990 to the 2022 surveys. The halt and reverse of this decline is we need the pumps. We need to remove the excess floodwater. We're not talking about normal wetland water. We're talking about excess floodwater in March. Look at the forest health from the 50s to now. Look across the river and at other backwater projects like Stormy was talking about that have pumps. All is well, including the bottomland hardwood forests there and the wetlands. I ask you to please be careful when considering opinions of folks from other areas of the state and the country. Even as professionals, we tend to skew our thoughts based on our experiences where we live and work. I came from North Dakota. If you had told me that you could have too much water in a wetland, I'd say you were lying, because it doesn't happen in North Dakota. But we have to look at the Deep South. Some say let nature take its course. I do believe Mother Nature knows best. But when man has modified the watershed as large as the Mississippi River to the extent that we have, our only recourse is to try to imitate Mother Nature in small project areas, like here in the South Delta. By removing the excess water caused by man, we can let Mother Nature take its course. Remember, the wetlands, especially seasonal ones, which we have many in the Delta, depend on and historically dependent on winter rains, not the Mississippi flooding waters. The annual cycle of these wetlands, in March they're full from the winter rains, and they begin to dry down through evaporation and percolation till the centers is a mudflat in July. Each stage of water level produces different vegetative communities that ring the wetlands. The moist soil plants will grow and be a buffet for wintering waterfowl as the fall and winter rains then fill them back up. Then in March, the annual cycle begins again. If, and only if, the pump removes the excess floodwater when needed. Again, thank you for your time and effort to understand this complicated issue. And please choose option number 2, which on the ground science has proven to be the best option for the restoration of these bottomland hardwoods and ecosystems and wetlands here in the Delta. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's Catherine Crump. I'm a Mississippi Levee Board Commissioner from Bolivar County. I'm sworn by law to protect people and property from flood waters. So of course I'm here. I'm also here because my mother, one of the widow women, owns property in Issaquena County, south of Myersville. Her property floods. In flood years, it cannot be planted. And the other reason I'm here is because being from North Delta, Bolivar County, my water drains down here. So I'm here to take responsibility for part of the water that fills up the bathtub. I spoke to you in February of 23, again in May 23, and I'm back now. And this time I'm here to thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you so much for working together as a federal joint task agency. Thank you so much for coming up with a solution that is a plan that balances and approach balance to both flood protection and wetland protection. It's very important to us. Thank you so much for coming up with a plan that protects people, animals, wetlands, croplands, and infrastructure. I feel like the best plan to do that is your alternative 2. It also should coincide with being compliant with the Clean Water Act. And it also should protect the South Mississippi Delta, better known as the Yazoo floodwater. It has been decades that we have been waiting on help. Some kind of flood protection that this area needs and deserves. You all have given us hope that that could actually occur soon. You've given us hope that promises that have been made year after year are possible. Please finish the pumps. Thank you very much again.
Hi, I want to welcome and thank you all for your attention for the solution for the flooding in the Yazoo Basin behind the levees that were supposed to protect us. We know this project has been studied for over 40 years and in plans since the 40s. False science has trumped proven science that 2 to 12 feet of standing water actually sucks the life out of the land. In 2019 was a wake-up call and recorded into science that the sustained floodwater did suck the life out of the communities. It put us in danger by damaging the infrastructure, killing most of the wildlife that couldn't fly away. I'm a flood survivor. I lived through it. I was there. I live at Eagle Lake, and it's just north of here, and we experience flooding often from the trapped rainwater. In 2019, we watched as the rainwater rose, and every time it rained, we curled up in a little ball, and it filled the Eagle Lake, and we flooded from the Eagle Lake side because of this flood, and it was agonizing. The damage that it did is still happening. In 2020, it came close to happening again. In 2019, when the water could be let out, when the water was gone, there was a scum, a crust on everything. It was on the trees. It was on the ground. It rotted. That flood water rotted. We had trees that were underwater for so long, at the top of the water levels, there were roots. It was too long, and it killed, and it literally sucked every organic matter. And when you would go outside for a year, there were no birds because there was no food. The rabbits were gone. Anything terrestrial was gone. I haven't seen a rabbit since the flood. No bugs, not even worms were alive back then. They all died. So these events are preventable, and they should have been prevented, and they need to be prevented. I support Alternative 2, the pumping station that will remove the rainwater trapped behind the levees, the Yazoo backwater area, the forgotten backwater flood. And I disagree with a mandatory buyout, and I do hope that you can get the water down a little bit lower. Thank you again for your time and for all your hard work. Thank everybody.
I'm Ken Klaus. That was my wife, Diane. You didn't get her name, I don't think. We live at Eagle Lake. We've been living there for 15 years or so. I grew up in Vicksburg. I've enjoyed the outdoor opportunities of the South Delta all my life. 7 generations of my family have enjoyed those opportunities. My cousin represents, I believe, the 4th or 5th generation of farmer in the South Delta. I've worked at all of the Corps offices in Vicksburg as a geotechnical engineer. I've worked on almost all of the major structures. I've inspected the levees with Peter Nimrod and his successor. This report boils down to 4 alternatives, but only 2 choices. Either you want to maximize the benefits of the South Delta, which requires a pump, or you're going to minimize the benefits of the South Delta. The no pump solution, which was demonstrated by the 2019 flood. The technical questions I have is that you have a huge pump station. You have a backwater area that is some of the finest bottomland hardwoods, and the key species are the oak, the bitter pecan, and the ash, and those species in the lower areas are threatened by the higher prolonged stages. They're not really discussed much in your report, but hundreds of thousands of hardwood trees died in the 2019 flood. Alternative 2 is the best probability that the crops can be planted. They're asking for more time. I'm not a farmer. The highest probability that the roads won't be damaged or flooded, that we have access. The highest probability that we have a better quality of life. I want to repeat that. A better quality of life. The no pump solution kills the economy, which is our agricultural economy and all that supports it. It threatens those hardwoods that are so important to a bottomland hardwood area. If you don't protect the hardwoods, it will all grow up in willow. You'll force the buyout of farms, and whatever you plant will eventually revert to willow, with the projected rainfall patterns that are projected in the future. I support alternative number 2. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the work you've done. I wish you would consider some alternatives of the height of your intake to give you opportunities to take years where you could actually lower water and maintain lower water to prevent the impact to those hardwoods. You already have the farmland set. There will be no more farmland cleared. You have 60,000 acres of WRP planted in oaks that are threatened without a pump and may be threatened at the pump levels you have now that aren't mentioned in the report. Again, thank you for your time.
My name is Will Rutherford. I farm on our family farm just south of Rolling Fork. And I've been listening to everybody, and everybody knows that the South Delta's farming country. I mean, that's what we do. Alternative number 2 is going to be our best bet from what y'all are offering. It's not a perfect solution. As Victoria said, and Ms. Deere said, and the sheriff just walked out said, if you're in the Delta, you're tied to agriculture some kind of way. We're not big in number, but we're all together. And there's been absolutely nobody say anything positive about the backwater. There's no positive impact. It would be better if we can have the pumps to pump down the water all year long. When we're farming, we don't stop in October. We're getting our land ready for next year. So, we may work on into Christmas trying to get prepared. When these floodwaters come, all of our landform fields have to get reworked. I feel optimistic about what y'all presented because it's better than nothing, but I think we could do better. Thank you.
I'd like to address the low water management of the steel bow structure. That low level is critical to the operation of the muddy bow gates at Eagle Lake that control the water of Eagle Lake. There was an agreement signed in 2000, which is very close to the agreement that was signed in 1997, where the maximum water of Eagle Lake was 76.9, being dropped down to 75. Today, that height is the stage is at 77, it's over 77, 77.6, I believe. The higher stages have killed at least 24 cypress trees that are the real beauty of the lake, the trees that are out in the lake bed. The management of the water management plan needs to be followed. It's signed by the Corps, the Game and Fish, and so forth. Again, thank you for your time, and I have a handout on that.
Okay, anyone else? Yes, sir.
Can we ask a question to the experts in the room?
Well, that's what I was about to say, that we can close this part out. We'll move the subject matter experts to the back of the room, and any questions that you might have, that would be the perfect time to ask that.
All right, there's a lot of the studies of the report, or a lot of portions of the report, talk about the spawning benefits from elevation 90 to elevation 93, and the benefits, the wetland benefits from elevation 90 to elevation 93. The center of the lower portion of the backwater area is where the bottomland hardwoods are. There are cypress trees there that are reported almost as old as the redwood trees. That's where your oaks are. That's where your pecans are. Trying to benefit a short-term spawning season from 90 to 93 when you already have an area flooded that's 300 and something thousand acres or more, which is more than Ross Barnett Reservoir, Grenada, Enid, Sardis, Arca Butler combined, trying to get that benefit while you're threatening the long-term flooding of the precious bottomland hardwood area. I'd like to understand how you are not damaging that area while you're trying to get a short-term benefit on the periphery. Let him come speak in the microphone.
Dr. Berkowitz, can you address some of these comments? Okay, we'll hold off on that then.
Hey, listen, now I'm on twice. Hey, I really appreciate the question, but we do want people to go talk to the experts in the back. So I think it would be great if you did that. I really appreciate the way you framed it so people can think about it. But Dr. Berkowitz is in the back, and he can help you walk through that. And then have follow-on questions, because naturally that's what's going to happen, right?
Sure.
I guess when I was listening to the presentation, we're saying it's the farmer and the residents needing the pumps, and the habitat doesn't need the pumps. The habitat needs the pumps because this amount of water is not natural. The problems the habitat is having, like we're talking about, the forest, is these pumps are not removing the water from the wetlands that is supposed to be there. It's removing the excess water that's above the water in the wetlands. If we don't get rid of that water, it can't dry down like the habitat needs it to be dried down. It's not uncommon for our seasonal wetlands to be dry in July. That's when the moist soil plants are growing. But in the 2019, if you went out there in the wintertime, when the ducks are coming in and they're looking for a little bit of water they can land in and feed, it wasn't there. There was a little bit of water, but there was no feed, because when that food was supposed to be growing, it was 10 foot underwater. And it wasn't the normal water that we want there in the wetlands. It was that floodwater above it. So these pumps are going to be beneficial to the environment. We talk about mitigation. Putting the pumps in is mitigation from destroying these wetlands. Thanks.
Mandatory buyouts of property. I'm not an attorney, but that sounds like eminent domain. I don't think it meets the tenets of eminent domain. You may get buyouts, but if you were speaking to the generation before me or before that, they'd run you out of here talking about mandatory anything of their property.
All right, any last comments before we close out? Well, I want to thank everyone for coming. And again, our technical specialist will be in the back with the posters. Feel free to ask them any questions that you might have. I'm going to turn it back over to Robin for closing comments and to Colonel Gibson.
Yeah, just I'm going to double tap on that. Thank you again. Some of you have been here a number of sessions. Every time we learn more, we hear more, and we hear each other. And so the time and energy is well spent, and we're looking to craft a path forward. So thank you for all your input.
I really appreciate the sessions that everyone has invested in the time. Many are repeat offenders, if you will, and we come to all 5 sessions already that we've had. So thank you for that. Thank you to Ken and Jackie for some of those comments. That really brings home some of the stories that we've heard. To me, this is not about a lot of the technical data. This is about connecting with the story of the backwater area. So thank you for making it real.
And with that, we'll close out this session. Thank you, everyone.